Okay, so we are covering probably the most important Miles Morales story in the history of Marvel Comics, but also one of the more controversial stories that Marvel had done in the history of Marvel in recent years, which is Ultimate End. Now, a little bit of backstory, because this does tie into Secret Wars and is a part of Secret Wars. So for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with how Secret Wars unfolded in 2015, which seems to be the version that we're going to be getting when it comes to the Secret Wars film in the MCU, that this all started with a variety of things, right? You'll find a link to the entire playlist in the comments section, but what this did is it basically gave us the collapse of the multiverse. Now, I'm not going to go into detail in terms of how all that happened. Check out the video for that. But what is important here is that with the collapse of the multiverse, Doctor Doom had basically seized the power of the Beyonders for himself, which effectively made him God. And in doing so, what he ended up basically doing was pulling together different pieces of alternate realities across the multiverse and combining them into a kind of patchwork called Battleworld. And so you literally have all these different alternate realities just kind of sitting side by side. So you have like the Marvel Zombies universe, and then like right next to it is the Age of Ultron universe, where Ultron conquered everything, right? It's just this small isolated pocket. And you can go from one place to the next, although you're not supposed to, right? Like they're not supposed to cross from what's called a domain. So you're not supposed to leave your domain and go to a different one. And so what matters here and what's important here is that this entire story takes place within the confines of Battleworld itself. But there are going to be things that people who are familiar with Secret Wars are going to be asking about. I will clarify all that stuff by the time we get to the end of the video. But what this does is it initially opens up with the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe meeting and talking. Now, this is kind of cool because what had happened here at the very beginning of Secret Wars in issue number 0 is you had the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe as the last two universes in existence. Everything else had basically been wiped out. They were on a collision course. It was the final incursion. They were all fighting each other, and then everything blinked, right? Because of Doctor Doom and all that stuff, everything basically collided, it blinked, and then Battleworld came into existence. So one thing that I do want to establish here is that like most people across the entirety of the Battleworld Secret Wars event, most people don't actually know the truth of what Doctor Doom did. All they know is the life that Doctor Doom gave them and the fact that Doctor Doom rules from on high. And that's it. That's really all they know. And so what's kind of crazy here is Bendis sort of takes his own turn, and again, we'll make sense of all of this. He establishes that there was basically a kind of dimensional rift that had been established in the Ultimate Universe that had effectively combined the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe together into one single domain, that they used to be separate. Now, this is where things get a little murky, because what ends up happening here is we're visited, or at least we see the arrival of Peter Parker at this giant gathering. Now, there's also familiar faces here, right? Like Scott Summers, Emma Frost, so on and so forth. But Peter Parker showing up here and meeting with everybody, initially he's just kind of obsessed about the fact that everybody seems to know his identity. The bigger concern here that they have is that because the main Marvel Universe and because the Ultimate Universe were at one point two different domains, but their dimensional tampering led to the domains combining, that Doctor Doom may very well become aware of what it is that they've done. And that if he does, there's only one of two possibilities. Either he allows it to sort of continue on and just sort of do its thing, which presents a dangerous precedent because it means that other people in other domains can start experimenting with dimensional rifts and potentially discover the truth of what Doctor Doom did, or Doctor Doom will intervene in some capacity. And so this kind of splits the group in half. Those who say that they need to report their findings to Doom, and others who say they don't. And in fact, this really seems to be a stark contrast, no pun intended, between both versions of Tony Stark. And so this is where we get this kind of cool explanation, because we actually learn the basis behind this portal. Now, if you've been reading the Ultimate Universe, or at least you were at this point in time, you know all of this, right? So just bear with me for people who don't. So what happened here at a distant point in the past is that when Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe died, Miles Morales became the new Spider-Man. And initially fans weren't overly receptive to it. And so in order to just kind of put the kibosh on that and to establish that Miles wasn't going anywhere, Brian Michael Bendis, who was writing Miles at the time, wrote a story called Spider-Man. And this involved the opening of a portal, which I want to say was by the Vulture, but I'm not going to swear to that basically saw Peter Parker from the main Marvel Universe crossing over into the Ultimate Universe. And that's how he and Miles met for the very first time. They had a kind of adventure together, and then when Miles told Peter that the Peter Parker in his reality had died, the main Marvel Universe Spider-Man gave Miles his blessing and said, "You now have my blessing to become the Spider-Man in this universe, carry on the legacy of your reality's version of Peter Parker, go forth and be a superhero." And it was basically Bendis telling all the people who were not fans commands of Miles to shut up and he wasn't going anywhere, and it worked. But what this story establishes is that the portal never actually was shut down. And so what ended up happening is the portal effectively exploded outward and then merged the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe into one single reality, and they've been here ever since. Right now, this is where things are kind of cool, and I think this is a good chance to explain this. The way that Secret Wars initially unfolded is that when it came to the collapse of the multiverse, there was no main Marvel Universe anymore, and there was no Ultimate Universe anymore, right? Like, there was nothing. It was simply just those superheroes who survived and those superheroes who were plucked from what few realities remained by Dr. Doom and thrown onto Battleworld. What Brian Michael Bendis is establishing here is that within Battleworld itself is a main Marvel Universe and an Ultimate Universe. It was basically Bendis trying to do his own thing and sort of wrap up the entirety of the Marvel multiverse in his own way. But the thing about this is that once the groups separate and they go their own ways, this leads to the arrival of the Thor Corps. They are, by extension, the law of doom, right? So whenever they come down and they say, this is going to happen, everybody in Battleworld treats it as Doom's word, because the alternative is to be killed by the Thor Corps. And in fact, that's exactly what happens. That when they're told by the Thor Corps itself, do not mess with this dimensional gate, leave it alone, right? Have no involvement here whatsoever, so says the word of doom. Hawkeye challenges it, right? And Hawkeye says, no, that's not gonna happen, right? We're gonna do whatever it is that we need to do. And the Thor Corps kills him on the spot, literally just eradicates him on the spot. Now that's one thing to understand, is under any normal circumstance, Thor could be rivaled by any number of heroes or villains who were out there, given varying degrees of power. The Thor Corps' power was elevated by Dr. Doom to allow them to overcome virtually any foe out there. The exception to this was when they met Thanos. When Thanos survived the collapse of the multiverse and he showed up with like the Cole Obsidian, right, like the Black Order and like the different villains, and just demolished the Thor Corps, which was amazing. Apocalypse did it too. This is why I tell you guys, you need to check out the playlist in the comments section after this video is done, because Avengers, New Avengers, Secret Wars, the greatest story ever told in the history of Marvel Comics. It's phenomenal. But of course, with Hawkeye being killed and the groups coming to the realization that at least for the moment, if they are gonna mess with this portal, they have to keep it hush-hush. They can't just go out there and just sort of do it brazenly. You end up having main Marvel Universe Iron Man and Ultimate Iron Man meeting with each other and kind of having a bit of a sit down, right? In a bit of a conversation. And in fact, it's one of these things where they sort of come to terms on how in the world could we possibly fix this, get things back to the way that they're supposed to be. So we have our domain, you have your domain, and that's effectively it. The other part of this is we get one of the coolest moments when it comes to like Ultimate Hulk fighting main Marvel Universe Hulk. And that's one of the cool things that did come out of Ultimate End to a degree, was that it was sort of a love letter for like all the different little battles and things that we'd wanted to see over the years but never really saw, right? Like who would win in a fight, Ultimate Hulk, main Marvel Hulk, which one of the two is the strongest, that kind of a thing. The way this kind of played out though is that you ended up having main Marvel Universe Bruce Banner, who was just kind of continuing his experiments and research into like dimensional rifts and so on and so forth, kind of the other half of the equation from what both Tony Starks were doing. But the Ultimate Banner showed up to meet him, and as the two of them were talking, you actually had this kind of disagreement between the two, which was surface level at best, and it was just a reason for Bendis to have these guys start fighting each other, which was awesome. Like, it was really cool for what it was. But the entire basis behind their disagreement is sort of an argument of futility, right? That Ultimate Universe Bruce Banner is very, very just cynical, right? And he is in a lot of ways a nihilist, just by virtue of him seeing the Incredible Hulk persona as more of a curse than anything else. He just kind of believes life is meaningless, right? There's no point in continuing on, and really even no point in anything at all. The difference here though is that Banner from the main Marvel Universe is a lot more hopeful. Now, a lot of this is because of what was going on with the character of the Incredible Hulk at this point in time, specifically Jason Aaron's run, which gave us a kind of reworked version of Professor Hulk, and so it was kind of a more powerful but also equally intelligent version of the Professor Hulk that we'd seen in years past, which was basically a Hulk with the mind of Bruce Banner, right? Just that kind of a thing. But with the two of these guys having totally different viewpoints, that ultimately the cynicism of Bruce Banner from the Ultimate Universe just gets the better of literally main Marvel Universe Banner, and he refers to Ultimate Banner as a coward, and that leads to like tempers flaring, the two of them fighting, and then literally like main Marvel Universe Hulk just like sends Ultimate Hulk flying through the Raft prison, right? Riker's prison, where like all the superpowered beings in that area are being held. It literally just causes a riot. And one of the people who just starts inciting their wrath on everybody around there is the Punisher, which is amazing because this Earth 616 Punisher, right, the main Marvel Universe Punisher, this guy survived. This guy made it out, which is awesome. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure how I agree with that because during like the Secret Wars, or maybe it was the Punisher Last Days, I want to say it was Secret Wars though, Secret Wars issue number 0, when the world was ending, the Punisher like shows up in a bar where you have all these villains and he's like, such a pity. It's the end of the world and I have all these bullets. What am I gonna do with them? And he kills every villain in the bar. He just sprays them all down mercilessly. But the thing about this is that he actually ends up meeting his Ultimate Universe counterpart, which is kind of a funny thing because there's a bit of a fight between the two of them, and then main Marvel Universe Punisher just seemingly comes out on top, which is cool, right? It's just one of these cool little moments here. But again, like what you have here in a lot of ways is that with tempers flaring, with a lot of anger and resentment and rage and just frustration with this sort of overcrowded environment, right? These two realities crammed together, it was only a matter of time before things went to pot exceedingly fast. And so what this does pretty quickly actually is it leads to just like an all-out, almost kind of like a mini civil war among like the heroes and villains within this reality itself. Now, those individuals who were focusing more on the dimensional rift and so on and so forth, they're kind of hands off, right? They're kind of doing their own thing. But this massive calamity and this massive battle does not go unnoticed. And in fact, there's a point where effectively Valeria ends up approaching Dr. Doom. Now, the thing about this, and the reason why it's so important is because within the realm of Secret Wars itself, and as far as Dr. Doom goes, one of the things that he had done is he had found an alternate reality version of Susan Storm, Franklin Richards, and Valeria Richards, and then adopted them as his own. In effect, he stole the life of Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. That was kind of his thing. And that actually becomes a major focal point towards the end of Secret Wars and the reason why it ends the way it does. But Valeria, being the head of the Science Foundation, right, the Future Foundation effectively, approaches him and says, given our intelligence, some kind of a dimensional rift was activated within the Ultimate Universe domain. And that led to the Ultimate Universe domain and the main Marvel Universe domain combining into one. And they're continuing to experiment with this despite being expressly told by your Thor Corps to stop doing it. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We don't know what's on the other side of this dimensional rift. There may be nothing. There could potentially be everything. They could reach a realm beyond anything that we've ever discovered. The realm of gods, right? The one above all. Who really even knows, right? No one knows for sure. And she says, but even within the group itself, they're split. One half of the group believes they should report their findings to you. The other half believes they should continue operating in secret, all the while blissfully unaware that we know everything that they're doing. And so she asks him, what was even the point, right? Valeria asked Doom, like, what was even the point of allowing this to happen in the first place? Of putting two realities so close together, knowing that at some future point in time, they were going to end up combining by whatever manner and whatever means, and then just kind of sitting back and allowing complete and total pandemonium to unfold. Now, there's a reason for this, and we'll talk about why this reason exists in the first place, because what it does is it ties into the original version of Battle World that Dr. Doom had created before he had wiped everything out and started over again. And so where Valeria asks, like where Dr. Doom doesn't answer her, and Valeria asks, do you want us to step in? Do you want us to do anything? Like, you know, Dr. Doom's response is no, right? Like, do not do anything, let things unfold as they will. And she asked the question, but what happens if something takes place that we can't foresee? Something that happens that changes everything. Enter Miles Morales. Now, this is one of the most important parts of this story. And the reason for this is, again, when the multiverse ended in Secret Wars issue number 0, that what you had were these two kind of like life rafts. Really one for what were effectively the villains, if you want to call them that, right? The Ultimate Universe version of Mr. Fantastic, along with Thanos, his Cull Obsidian. And then in turn, you had the other raft, what were basically the good guys. Peter Parker Spider-Man, Miles Morales, the good Reed Richards from the main Marvel Universe, and a handful of others. That what had taken place here is that when the multiverse collapsed, those rafts actually just kind of existed out there in the ether and then ultimately arrived on Battleworld. Now, there was some time displacement hijinks and things like that that we're not going to get into. The point being, Miles Morales showing up here, he knows exactly what's going on. He understands exactly what's happening here. He knows everything that's taking place, and he's about to spill the beans, but not necessarily in the most direct way. In fact, he fires his webbing over everybody and just says, stop. Now, initially, he goes to explain everything, but Emma Frost basically steps up and says, look, as a psychic, I can tell you right now, if you tell them everything you know, none of them are going to believe you. They're all going to think you're crazy. The only way for them to know is to be shown. And so Emma Frost uses her telepathic ability to basically combine the minds, or at least to project the mind of Miles into the mind of everybody else here. And that's when they come into the realization of what's going on. Now, this is the explanation that I'm sure a lot of you guys have been waiting for. Hopefully you guys find it interesting. So when everything was going on with the multiversal collapse, right? The Beyonders and the Molecule Men and all that kind of stuff, that there was basically a last-ditch effort by Dr. Doom and the Molecule Man Owen Reese and Doctor Strange to defeat the Beyonders. They did this by taking all the Molecule Men that remained from across the multiverse, who were like these universe-sized bombs. Literally, when a Molecule Man dies, it blows up the whole universe. That what happened is all these Molecule Men were basically just thrown at the Beyonders and blew all the Beyonders up, and then eradicated basically all of the multiverse except for the main Marvel Universe and the Ultimate Universe itself. And so that's what set these two worlds on a collision course, assuming we ignore everything this Bendis has been doing with regards to the portal and the dimensional rift and all that kind of stuff. And so what happened here is that once Dr. Doom had seen the Beyonders defeated, he took the entirety of their power. Then he created the first version of Battleworld. Now, it's not directly mentioned here in the story, but the original version of Battleworld, as it was shown and discussed in Secret Wars from 2015, was that it was a place of suffering, right? It was just only the strong deserved to survive. Those individuals who were too weak were perished. It was like warfare almost 100% of the time. There was no light because there was no sun, and then Dr. Doom started to realize that this world was destined to fail. It was destined to fall apart. And so what had happened is that he had completely reworked the entirety of Battleworld, just reestablished everything. When Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four tried to fight him, he basically took away Johnny Storm's own ability to control himself, sent him out into what you could call space, kind of the area orbiting Battleworld, and turned him into the sun. And so he lights Battleworld now. And Battleworld had basically become what it is now, but all this information is spilled directly to everybody here by Miles Morales. That God King Doom is not some being who has always existed, and he's always been God, and he's all powerful, and you always have to listen to him. At one point, he was just a dude, and then attained just an insane level of power, and used it to recreate the entirety of the multiverse, and seize absolute control over everything. And so once they all start to realize what's going on, then they all realize, okay, now their main enemy is Dr. Doom. And so what ends up happening is they join basically everybody else in the final fight against Doom over at Doomstat. Now, that's actually covered in the main Secret Wars story itself, but the funny thing about this is that with everything going on, what ends up happening is that all these different characters kind of start blinking out of existence, right? They kind of start disappearing. The reason behind this is because what's going on behind the scenes is the conclusion of the story, where Reed Richards and Dr. Doom are fighting, and the Molecule Man takes the power from Doom, gives it to Reed, and Reed recreates everything. So in effect, it's a reset, right? To a degree. I mean, Marvel should have rebooted, but they didn't because they were cowards. So basically, everybody kind of vanishes and things sort of go back to normal the way that they were supposed to. But the reason why this is so important for Miles Morales, right? It's one of the most important things for his character. When he gets back to the Ultimate Universe, when he's sleeping, he wakes up to his mom. Now, this is why this is so important, because his mom's dead, right? Now, there's a whole reason why this happens, and it's the reason that you would least expect, right? But Miles Morales gets his mom back. This sets everything going forward into the future of the Ultimate Universe. Miles in the main Marvel Universe is part of all new, all different Marvel. So for the guys who are always curious how it is that Miles' mom came back to life, this was it, right? This is how she came back. It was a gift from the Molecule Man, Owen Reese, for one of the coolest things that Miles Morales ever could have done. It was phenomenal. But again, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Make sure you guys check out the link in the comments section for like the entirety of the Avengers, New Avengers, Secret Wars story, because it's phenomenal. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.